Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take your sources, the articles, reports, transcripts you send our way, and really dig in to find the essential stuff you need to know.
Yep. No sifting through noise. We just guide you through the material you've given us, pull out the key points, and, help you get why they matter, based only on what's right here.
Exactly. And today, we're diving into something that sits right at the intersection of, well, public health and the really tricky business of how information gets put together, especially information that might, shape policy.
We're looking at a specific report about children's health, and honestly, some pretty eyebrow-raising questions that came up about the actual evidence it cites.
Right. And our source material for this one, it's entirely from a transcript. It was a discussion on MSNBC featuring, let's see, a New York Times political reporter.
And a former presidential campaign advisor who's also a communications expert.
And crucially, a doctor. Someone with, decades focused on children's health.
A really experienced panel for this topic.
So, our mission here, it's straightforward. We just want to unpack what this specific discussion, this transcript, reveals about the report. What were the big issues they found with the citations?
And what were the reactions? The analysis from the people in that conversation. We're sticking strictly to what's in this transcript they discussed.
All right, let's get into it then. How was this report initially described in the discussion?
Well, according to the transcript, the people talking described it as a pretty comprehensive look. It was meant to examine children's health trends and dig into what it claimed were the, root causes of chronic health issues in kids.
Okay, sounds important. And the transcript mentioned that the whole story about problems with the report, it was actually broken up by a news organization first.
Yeah, they noted that, which kind of sets the stage for why they were even having this discussion on MSNBC, right? But the real core issue, the thing that really dominated their conversation, was all about the report's citations.
The footnotes.
Yeah.
The bedrock of any report, supposedly.
Exactly. And this is where, based on their discussion, the report's foundation starts to look pretty shaky. The analysis in the transcript really highlighted that a whole lot of the citations had major problems.
Like what kind of problems?
Well, for starters, some were just riddled with errors.
Mm-hmm.
Basic stuff, but still significant, like listing the wrong author for a study or getting the title completely wrong, things you'd hope would be caught.
Okay, errors happen. Typo here, a copy-paste mistake there. Annoying, sure, but maybe understandable that it sounds like it went beyond that.
Oh, yeah. The discussion in the source material definitely moved past simple errors to something, frankly, a lot more concerning. They used the term fabricated altogether for some citations.
Fabricated. Whoa, okay. That's a strong word.
It is. And it means, according to their discussion, that it wasn't just a mistake in the reference, the paper they were claiming to cite. It just didn't exist.
Seriously, not even close.
Apparently not. The transcript emphasized these weren't just vague references either. They list a full title, a journal name, a date, even an author, for a paper that, according to the discussion, just wasn't real, couldn't be found anywhere because it was made up.
Wow. Okay, so not just getting it wrong, but potentially inventing sources. That brings us to the big question then. Why does that level of error, especially outright fabrication, matter so much?
Well, the discussion in the source was crystal clear on this. When you've got fabricated citations, it obviously raises questions about the credibility of the report's findings. Right. I mean, how can you trust the conclusions?
Right. If the evidence you're supposedly building your case on is just not there or misrepresented like that, the whole thing kind of falls apart, doesn't it?
Completely. It undermines the entire structure. And the transcript also touched on the human side of this, or at least the professional side.
What do you mean?
They mentioned that actual researchers, people with real reputations, apparently had their names attached to some of these non-existent papers.
Oh, that's not good.
Not at all. Understandably, the transcript said these researchers were very concerned about their names and reputations being used that way. Imagine seeing your name on a completely bogus study cited in a major report. Yikes.
Yeah, that's awful. Reputation is everything in research. Did they give any specific examples in the discussion?
They did. To really make the point clear, the transcript mentioned a specific case, Katherine Keyes. She was identified as a professor of epidemiology at Columbia University, a real expert.
Okay, what happened with her?
According to the conversation in the transcript, the report cited a paper supposedly written by her. It was meant to be about mental health and substance use in adolescence.
Let me guess.
You got it. As stated right there in the source material, that specific paper cited in the report, it didn't exist.
And she confirmed that?
Again, according to the discussion they were having, yes. She confirmed she never wrote any paper with that title that the report was citing.
Wow. And the transcript indicated this wasn't just a one-off.
Exactly. The discussion noted this was just one example they highlighted, but there were others uncovered too. It suggested, a pattern as presented in that segment.
Okay, so that really lays out the foundational problem with the report itself, at least based on the analysis in this MSNBC segment we're looking at. Let's shift gears then. How did the experts and commentators in that discussion react? Sounds like they might have had strong opinions.
Oh, they absolutely did. They didn't hold back.
Yeah.
First up was Dr. Irwin Redlener. The transcript painted a picture of him about 50 years in healthcare, international reputation in children's health, co-founder of the Children's Health Fund, positions at Columbia, Albert Einstein College of Medicine.
Okay, so definitely someone with serious credentials in this area. What was his take?
His reaction, as captured in that conversation, was incredibly blunt. He straight up called the report misinformed lying document.
Lying document.
Yeah. And he zeroed right in on the core problem, pointing out that they had fabricated citations, no missing words.
What really drove that intense reaction based on the transcript? Was it just the bad science or something more?
It seemed to be much more about the potential consequences. He expressed, profound concern that this fabricated information could actually be used to create policies and recommendations, policies affecting the health of millions of kids. He called it really unconscionable.
Unconscionable. That's a heavy word. It speaks volumes about his concern.
It really does. And the discussion also captured his pretty strong views on the person promoting the report. Dr. Redlener, according to the transcript, described this individual as unqualified, unscientific, and pushing crazy ideas that are bad for America's children.
Strong language again.
Very. And he added a point about influence, noting this person has, and this is a quote from the discussion in the source, the biggest public health platform and megaphone of any human being on the planet, which, obviously made the potential harm seem much greater in his eyes.
Did he offer any comparison, like how this would be viewed elsewhere?
He did. A really stark one. He said, as captured in the transcript, that if anyone tried to pull this in an academic medical school setting, putting out a report like this, they'd be fired. Simple as that.
That really puts the perceived severity into perspective, doesn't it, from an academic integrity standpoint?
Absolutely. And based on his comments in the source, he wasn't done there. He seemed to feel there was a need for accountability. He suggested senators involved in any confirmation process and even medical organizations that had maybe stayed quiet.
That they needed to speak up now.
Yes. He felt, according to the discussion, that the individual responsible cannot remain in that office using misstated data and really dishonest data to drive critical public health policy. It was a clear call, rooted in the alleged dishonesty he saw.
And beyond the policy level, did he talk about how this sort of thing impacts doctors on the ground, like pediatricians?
Yeah, that was a really crucial point he made, drawing on his experience. He explained that practicing pediatricians, they really rely on publications and reports like this. It's how they stay current.
To guide their advice to families.
Exactly. They need credible info to understand new research, to guide how they practice medicine day to day, and maybe most importantly, to make recommendations to parents about their kids' health.
He used vaccinations as an example in the discussion, didn't he?
He did. The transcript noted, that vaccines are proven safe and effective, saving lives for decades. But Dr. Redlener explained that a report like this one, with all these questions around it, even if it's completely wrong, it fuels the skepticism that's already out there about medical information.
Making the doctor's job harder.
Way harder. He said it makes it much harder for doctors to give guidance that parents feel they can trust, and harder for families to feel confident in that guidance. He described it in the discussion as exacerbating a terrible situation.
Terrible for the doctors trying to help, and terrible for the parents just trying to do the right thing for their kids. That's a sobering, real-world impact.
Definitely. It shows how questions about data integrity aren't just academic debates.
Okay, so that covers the very strong public health reaction highlighted in the transcript. But the discussion also brought in a different angle, right? Politics and communication.
That's right. They brought in Kevin Madden, described in the source as a communications expert, former presidential campaign advisor. He looked at it through that kind of strategic lens.
And what was his analysis based on the transcript, particularly regarding the White House response?
Well, according to the conversation, the initial White House response involved defending the report, but then kind of punting further questions to HHS, the Department of Health and Human Services.
Okay, standard procedure sometimes? Or did he read more into it?
Madden, in the transcript, interpreted that move pretty clearly. He saw it as a signal that, quote, they really want no part of it. He suggested that kind of deferral shows the administration recognizes the scrutiny the report is under and basically wants to create some distance from having to defend the nitty-gritty details.
It's like a political hot potato. You take it, HHS.
Sort of, yeah. And he made another key point. This wasn't just some random low-profile report. He noted that the movement supporting the person behind the report, they'd been anticipating and hyping it for a pretty long time.
Ah, so there was buildup. Expectations were high within that group.
Exactly. Which, in Madden's analysis, as stated in the discussion, made these citation problems a huge unforced error. It blew up on them after they'd built it up.
Yeah, you hate to see an unforced error in politics. Why did he think this particular error was so damaging for that movement?
Well, based on his analysis in the transcript, their whole pitch, their advocacy, had consistently been framed as evidence-based advocacy. That was their brand, essentially.
Right. They claimed to have the real data, the science the establishment was ignoring.
Precisely. So when the very foundation of their big, hyped-up report gets shredded because the evidence is questioned or even fabricated,
Yeah.
it just completely undermines that core claim. It hits right at their credibility and their stated method.
That makes sense. Did he talk about how they were trying to handle it, communications-wise, like the press secretary?
He did. He offered an interesting interpretation of the press secretary's strategy. He suggested she was making a deliberate choice to speak directly to the base, the grassroots supporters of this movement.
His theory was that this base maybe doesn't care as much about scientific journals or academic standards.
That was his point, yeah. That this base likely feels someone is finally tackling chronic illnesses differently than the quote-unquote establishment, and that message resonates powerfully, perhaps more powerfully, than concerns about scientific rigor. They connect with the what, maybe not the how.
But there's a catch, right?
There is. He wrapped up his analysis in the transcript by saying, okay, that approach might energize your core supporters, but if you want to win the bigger argument, if you need to persuade the big middle of America, as he called it.
Then you probably need more than just vibes. You need credible evidence.
Exactly. Relying on a document with these kinds of fundamental questions about its evidence is going to be a really significant hurdle when you're trying to convince that broader, potentially more skeptical audience. They might actually care about where the data comes from.
It really highlights that classic tension, doesn't it? Talking to your base versus persuading the undecided middle.
Definitely a common challenge in political comms.
Okay, let's pull back for a moment and summarize what we've unpacked from this specific MSNBC discussion, this one source. What are the key takeaways?
Well, we analyzed a conversation about a children's health report that, according to the discussion presented, was riddled with serious problems in its basic evidence. We're talking errors, yes, but also crucially fabricated citation stuff just made up.
And we heard about the incredibly strong reaction from a public health expert in that discussion. Deep concerns about using potentially fabricated info to make policy for kids, calling it unconscionable, and pointing out how it damages trust and makes doctors' jobs harder.
Right. And then we looked at the political and communication side, through the analysis in the transcript, how this became an unforced error for the movement that hyped the report, undermining their evidence-based claims, and the strategic challenge of communicating about it to different audiences.
So, connecting this back to you, listen right now. Why does drilling down into this one discussion matter? Well, understanding how information gets sourced or doesn't get sourced, the huge importance of credible evidence, and the ways information gets spun or received, that's just fundamental for navigating complex topics today, especially anything touching health, science, or policy.
It really throws a harsh light on the whole challenge of building trust in information, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And it kind of leaves us with this final thought, drawing from the themes in this specific discussion we've dissected. In this age where we're drowning in information and skepticism is maybe understandably high, when you see a situation like the one described here, where the basic validity of evidence in a major report is seriously questioned, what does that tell us about the sheer difficulty of finding common ground and building trust around really critical issues like public health?
Yeah, it's a tough question with implications far beyond just this one report or this one discussion.
It really is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.